Okay, good morning, or even good afternoon, or late at night from anywhere around the world. Welcome to webinar number 2, Community Engagement and Inter-Sectoral Collaboration. How do we break from dissociated approaches across sectors and boundaries and transition towards integrated, and I would say even inclusive practices? That was not part of the title, inclusive, but I really would commend the speakers to touch base there. I'm Henk Ovink, Special Envoy for International Water Affairs, and happy to be the moderator of this panel. As speakers, we have Dennis van Peppen, who leads anything water or water writ large at RVO. Annadel Cabanban from Wetlands International, the NGO that understands everything you could say on wetlands, environment, and biodiversity, and how that could work for us. And Juliette Eulderink, she's a yepper, as we say that, young professional, and really welcome Juliette. You worked in Hanoi, as well as at the University of Delft. Well, having experience in Vietnam in water, I would say you can work anywhere around the world, because the challenging environment and water and climate capacity, both from research as from practice, will really help. So great to have you with us, Juliette, and look forward to the discussion. Silos thinking and practicing. This is what we find in the world. You could say this is the common practice. We're fragmented, disoriented, and figuring out how to get to approaches that really make sense, that have impact, and that deliver not on, a single focused not in a single focused way. In my popular version, stupid, single focused answers to these complex problems, but really take into account all these aspects of challenges in the context of delivering impact across, I would say, sustainable development goals and climate promises. We're in the midst of COP, not only in the midst of the Amsterdam International Water Week, but also in the midst of COP26. And you've heard yesterday world leaders talking about the urgency to act, but not yet on then what. So I'm not saying that task is on our shoulders, but at least we should be able in this session to touch upon, okay, what would get us to a better world and how we shy away from these siloed approaches, these fragmented approaches. Now we move towards a more integrated, collaborative and collective way. Now, with that, I'd like to give the floor to Dennis van Peppen, leading the community of practice together with Stephanie Jansen on social inclusion, next to his water writ large role at RVO. Dennis and Stephanie wrote an article in the Water Governance magazine, really touching upon how inclusion can help drive a comprehensive, impactful, and transformative approach. Dennis, and of course, one of the driving forces behind the Water as Leverage program RVO runs in the world. Dennis, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Henk. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Great. And do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Super.
I also, yeah.
Great. Okay, well, Henk, thanks very much for the introduction. Very happy to be here for this very important subject. It is an important event, the Amsterdam International Water Week. Very happy that we're able to organize it again here and addressing water challenges and issues in the world. Today we talk about breaking through silos, as you very rightfully say, Henk, because we in the Netherlands we always propagate an integrated approach, and we think that's very important. And being integrated means that you break through silos and you work together, and you work across different disciplines and different sectors. And today I want to talk a bit about an initiative that we've started a year and a half ago, a community of practice on social inclusion in international water projects. So yes, Henk, I'm touching upon the topic of inclusivity here today because we think that's very important. And it's something that I've started together with a few colleagues, so Matthijs Selmans of my organization, Stephanie Janssen of the Ataris, and Iris Belsma of the Netherlands Water Partnership. So there's definitely a co-effort, and I'm in the lucky position to talk about it here today. Let's go to so this is what I want to talk to you about. So why do we do this? How does it work? And what comes out of it? So if we go to the first subject, why a community of practice? Well, the Netherlands, as you know, probably is quite active for decades already in international water management, being a country, very much involved in water management itself. Water are very pressing issues, a very pressing issue for our country, that we would not be able to survive if we would not manage our water properly. So it has always been a central part of our international foreign policy, both on the development aid side, but also on trade relations and even on political side. And one of the things that the Netherlands has been doing, especially over the past 2 decades, trying to support cities, deltas, countries with planning exercises or strategy exercises. For example, in the Ho Chi Minh City, in Vietnam, in Jakarta, through the NCICD program, in Beira, Mozambique, together with Henk, I was fortunate to work in the cities of Chennai in India, and Kunam, Bangladesh, and Semarang in Indonesia. And we really try to support these cities and deltas and countries with integrated planning, so that water management becomes more sustainable, and that those delta cities and countries are better prepared for all the changes as a result of climate change that are coming at them. Because this is actually more high profile than we sometimes realize. So we have a tendency to take this, or we used to have a tendency of taking this as quite a technocratic exercise. But what we might not have always realized is that water is not only technocratic, but touches all levels of society, communities, politics, business, etc., etc. And that's also what has been noticed by, for example, international and national NGOs and the international academic community, which have been studying Dutch and international bilateral collaboration on water management, and especially the strategies and plans, very closely. And actually, these have studied quite in a critical way. And for example, this is an article written by a MIT expert who actually says that a lot of these strategies that European but also European countries, also Japan, are developing, but especially also the Netherlands, have a quite a technocratic engineering approach, and gives the impression that if you just create a program such as Room for the River, all your problems will be solved. And she says that that's not the case, because it could actually lead to evictions and to victims in general of implementing these concepts, because in many of the places where these type of projects or plans are implemented, they're quite strongly populated. Another aspect, this is, for example, a screenshot from a Dutch documentary made about the situation in Jakarta and the Dutch involvement, supporting Jakarta and the Indonesian government in preparing a plan for making Jakarta safer and protecting it from sea level rise. But one of the criticisms that came out is that, for example, one of the topics, one of the issues that the Dutch consultants involved in this process didn't take in consideration were the interests of the fishermen who, for example, in the plan as was developed, would not have been able to sail out to the sea anymore, depriving them of their livelihoods. These type of documentaries are also fed by quite activistic Dutch NGOs, which have written quite critical reports on these type of plans, such as these, touching very much on the topics of social justice, human rights, and gender equality issues. But also there have been quite extensive analysis, policy analysis, academic analysis written about policy transfer, saying actually analyzing that it's not a very easy one-way street. So the Dutch delta planning or governance knowledge is being developed in a Dutch delta under very different circumstances than the deltas and cities where the Dutch are usually working. Transferring knowledge and policy requires quite a lot of thinking and effort, and also needs to be looked through the prism of the local context, which is all often from a political, economical, and social point of view, and even cultural point of view, very different from the Dutch environment. Well, finally, why actually we started this community of practice was a conference organized in Amsterdam in 2018 by Dutch universities and NGOs. And the whole idea behind the conference was addressing the critical perspective on delta and city planning, where there's Dutch involvement. And for example, there were even accusations coming at the table. Are the Dutch violating human rights? Are the Dutch only doing this to make money? Does it address the real problems? Isn't there too many Dutch experts involved instead of local experts? All very relevant issues. To what extent they were true, that of course is a matter of debate. But the fact that there is a problem and that there's an issue that needed to be addressed. So time for action. And in October 2019, together with Stephanie, I organized a meeting at our agency with officials from the Dutch government, from academia, from the NGO sector and the private sector, to actually start talking to each other about the topic of social inclusion, instead of talking about each other, which has been happening before. A lot of reports, a lot of documentaries, a lot of critical articles, but we felt that nobody really actually talked to each other about different dilemmas and different perspectives. So that's why we started this community of practice, and it was felt that the sector felt that it led to more understanding, and it felt that it led to urgency in addressing these issues. So how does it work in practice? Well, it's actually, and here's the definition, but what's most important, I think, is that you talk to each other without actually knowing in advance what will be the outcome of what you will learn. So you step in very openly, bringing your experience in the field, but you're stepping in very openly to learn from others, and without knowing what you're actually going to take out of the meeting. These are some symbols. So what we're trying to do is facilitate learning and dialogue between the different parties involved in the community, but also along the way discovering how to do that. And we try to learn from practice through cases, real cases. So the cases that we have been studying so far in the community have been the Waters Leverage Program of Henk, the Manila Bay Sustainable Development Master Plan, and next week we'll have a meeting on the Dutch cooperation with Mozambique in the city of Beira. And we very much use theory-U as a method in this community, where we feel that listening, observing, understanding before reaching conclusions is extremely important. So this we applied also for the case study of the Waters Leverage for Resilient ACES Cities in Asia program, where we took different steps to actually scope the case through interviews before we actually organized the meeting. And the meeting itself, the theory way of working, understanding, gaining insights, and then coming to action is what is central. And step 5 is follow-up, and that's, for example, led to articles and these type of webinars. So what are the main results and insights so far? Well, let's take the Manila Bay case. We learned there that that it's extremely complicated. A city or an agglomeration of 30 million people with 14 provinces and more than 200 municipalities with immense physical and social challenges. We discovered that stakeholder participation was actually, something that we propagated, but actually quite new to the Philippines. And then if you want to develop a master plan for such a big area, how do you include 30 million people? And does participation even work in this context? And yes, we discovered that there was some success because the participation meetings that were organized included around 250 people from 120 organizations, and more than 2,500 people have provided input. But also we discovered that involving people is not the same thing as an inclusive process. And one of the limits of the process was that it had an end which was too fixed. So the time taken for the process was way too short. We also we engaged NGOs were engaged to manage the process, but they were not always sufficiently equipped or positioned, and maybe given too much responsibility in this process, making them also vulnerable. So what we learned from the Waters Leverage case, there were basically we could divide them in 3 pillars, which we call now inclusive community engagement, inclusive project development, inclusive commissioning, because we felt that inclusivity is not just simply a matter of involving local stakeholders or local vulnerable communities, but also the way you act, for example, as a commissioner, or the way you establish or make a team that is working on a project or a plan. It's very important that a team doesn't consist only of Western white male engineering experts, but also contains different disciplines such as social scientists, such as engineers, such as architects and urban planners, but also especially local experts, local engineers, local urban planners, local social scientists. It's very important that you invest in the process of the project development or the strategy development. That means, for example, that you seek out local and indigenous knowledge, and that you're there locally the whole time, and that you design a process where, as a commissioner, you're a partner with the teams that are making the proposals. And that requires a very different attitude and standing of the commissioner, which is much less top-down that we are currently used to. And so that's really breaking through the silos of traditional project and program development, which is actually, I think, currently still the standard. So we hope to disseminate this knowledge much more, share it with our international partners, and try to break through those silos and get to a different type of project and program development, because that's so needed to get the right projects. Because as Henk said, 99% of the projects that are currently being developed in the world and implemented is simply stupid. So finally,
that was Dennis. I hope he returns. Let's wait if he does this in a second. It seems like he doesn't. So with that, he was saying, finally, we heard this whole presentation on how important it is to really grasp what inclusion means, that it is not a tick the box, but it should be part of every aspect of understanding, collaboration, questioning. It is not enough to do this, work with a community like it's often perceived, but that it really is a responsibility in all phases for all actors. It is part of the development of the project. It's part of working with everybody across, but it's also very much part of a culture of commissioning. And that is perhaps very challenging. Having said that, and not certain when Dennis will return back in, I'd like to hand the floor to Annadel Cabanban. Very good to see you, Annadel. I already talked a little bit about Wetlands International and your amazing work that you're doing around the world, making sure that we find back our roots more or less in what nature and biodiversity gives us, but also returning to a relationship with that capacity of our planet that brings in an understanding of how we can progress sustainable, resilient, but also inclusive, collaborative and comprehensive approaches. Many projects around the world, but Annadel, it's good to hear from you because you're working in Manila, and I think you're also calling in from the Philippines, if I'm correct. So please share with us in this session of Amsterdam International Water Week on community engagement and intersectoral collaboration, how to break through the silos and get to inclusive and integrated approaches. Your experience from your work, as well as from Wetlands International in a broader context. The floor is yours, Annadel.
Thank you. How do I share my screen? This is new to me.
Annadel, if you try the menu under your pictures, on the pictures of the speakers, then there's a screen with a red cross over it.
Right.
So if you press that one, then you are able to share your screen.
Right. Oops.
Now you need to find the PowerPoint open on your screen, because now we see your whole screen. So the sharing is working well. Now we see the PowerPoint, and then you can press the start of the presentation. Then we will see the full picture. Great, now we see everything. Perfect. I think perhaps Annadel disappeared from the session now, unfortunately.
Yes, so we only have me, you, and Juliette. Because Dennis is also still not with us.
Dennis will be back in 2 minutes. We just had contact with him, so he will return to the session, and hopefully Annadel will as well. I will contact her again.
Okay, Juliette, can I bring you into the conversation? Otherwise, people are only listening to or looking at failing connections, which more or less is also the blue or red thread through this session. How can we bridge this? From your experience, Juliette, can you already a little bit perhaps reflect on what Dennis said, but also in the context of inclusion and collaboration and a comprehensive approach, what you would like to add? Yeah, please.
Yeah, what I really liked about Dennis's talk is how he was explaining how the technocratic, more technical approach is often not the way to go, especially when doing intersectoral collaboration. And I had a very similar experience working in Southeast Asia. For me, the most important step there to get things done was not to preach the best innovations or things like that. The first step I had to take is to build up these relationships and trust, because you cannot convince anyone or make any type of sustainable impact without this relationship. And I think especially in different cultures, this is very, very important. And the Dutch can often, quite quickly go into the details and into the work. But it's so important to also have the social bond to effectively work together, I would say. So I like the way Dennis was telling us about his community of practice and how they were trying to facilitate that.
And can you expand a bit on how you do this? Because thanks, and I couldn't agree more. Jumping to conclusions never works. But reaching out, forging partnerships, helping to build trust. In your experience in working in Asia, what were key ingredients and how to get there? And after you answer, I will get back to Annadel. Annadel, it's good to see you again. I just picked up a little conversation with Juliette before I hand it over to you. Juliette.
So maybe to... I didn't really introduce the work I do to the listeners, so maybe just to explain a bit.
Perhaps.
I am part of the Young Experts program, which is basically a program which allows young people working on sustainable development goals to go abroad. And these are both Dutch young people and local counterparts. So what made me, for example, very effective is that I had a local counterpart in Vietnam. So he was a Vietnamese young expert as well. And he could really explain things to me quite well, like little cultural nuances and how, water management works in Vietnam, and also how cultural aspects work in Vietnam, which is something, which was really important, as I said from the beginning. And then as you start to get to know the culture better, that's when you really start making impact together. And the opposite is true or the same is true for him as well. Coming to the Netherlands, he was quite I had a little bit of a culture shock as well, how things were done here. People can be quite direct. So for us to work effectively together, we had to explain a little bit to each other how the cultures worked, and we had to be very open in that discussion. That's a little bit maybe on a smaller scale, how collaboration should work, right? You should have open and honest conversations and have respect for each other's cultures.
Very good to hear, Juliette. Thanks so much, and good lessons also to take forward. And thanks for sharing, but also improvising a bit. Annadel, glad to see you back. You also put up your first slide. Floor is yours.
Thank you. I was requested to give a talk on social inclusion and community engagement, and I'd like to give our story based on the establishment of integrated river basin management in Cagayan de Oro, Mindanao. Just to give you a geographical context, this is the Philippines on the left side of the screen. This is the Pacific Ocean, where most, if not all of the typhoons brew and originate and crash into the Philippines, entering the middle part of the country. And here is Mindanao. This is where the Cagayan de Oro River Basin is. And the Cagayan de Oro River Basin is like a teardrop shaped landscape. Here is the upstream. This is the downstream, and it opens to Manila Bay. The main river, Cagayan de Oro River, leads to Makahalar Bay. You can see in this map that there are green spots and red spots. The green spots are forested areas. The red spots are critical areas that need restoration, need rehabilitation, need replanting of native trees. In 2011, there was a tragedy that came about. There was a strong Typhoon Sendong, Typhoon Washi internationally, and it brought a lot of rain. The rain water was not absorbed by the watershed. It rushed down to the river. It caused the loss of life and property. In particular, it caused the loss of facilities of the Cagayan de Oro water district. As a result, there was no water for over 2 weeks, drinking water, domestic use. But there are also positive things that came out from that tragic event. The Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council is a group of multi-sectoral organizations was galvanized to act, to spur into action, and to come up with a management plan to deal with the cause of this flooding, the risk to flooding. And the other positive thing that came out of this was the fact that RVO and VEI had learned about this incident, and they're willing to help. And so they inherently designed a project that's inclusive. You can see here on the right side the activities or topics that are acted on by the different groups. The improved management and water supply infrastructure by the Cagayan de Oro Water District in coordination with the FRRL Industrial Trading Corporation. They are working together to restore the infrastructure, putting the pumps up elevated, not buried, and not subjected to flooding when it happens, and also making sure that the delivery of water is efficient. The loss of water is also one big loss of good water and efficient use of water. Downstream is where the community lives, the urbanized community lives, and because of the flooding during Typhoon Washi, there were internally displaced people, there were refugees, and they were placed in an area. Unfortunately, the area did not have connections to water and sanitation. So they included Red Cross to establish this connection for water and sanitation and hygiene. Up here on the screen, on the topmost of the poster, you can see Catchment Restoration. They fortunately didn't want to just address the infrastructure problems, but wanted to really look at the root cause of the reason for flooding. And so restoration was talked about, and we were invited to participate in the project. So the work package, there were several work packages in the Reach the Coast Rain to Top project. And the particular work package that we are involved in is work package 2. It's to deal with the risk to flooding. We wanted to reduce this using the restoration of the watershed. It is a tripartite partnership among 3 NGOs. This landscape shows Mount Kitanglad and Mount Kalatungan. This is the upstream, and this is the river where the water flows. And down here, Cagayan de Oro City is where the urbanized area is. So inherently, we share our resources in making this project realistic. So there is a HIN11 Foundation Incorporated. HIN11 Foundation is the CSR arm, or the corporate social responsibility arm of the plantation company, fruit company, Unifruti. And we also have the Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, which I already mentioned, which is a multi-sectoral platform composed of academics, public sector, local government units, and private individuals, and many others. So to the question, what facilitates engagement and collaboration among the 3 groups, including Wetlands International, which is an international NGO focusing on the restoration and safeguarding of wetlands, such as lakes, rivers, swamps, and others. And it's basically inherently shared goals and objectives. This is the foundation of an engagement or collaboration. And in terms of process, it's the willingness and openness to share resources based on what are your strengths. For instance, Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council is strong in its advocacy for payment for excessive services. And it has the technicians or academics who are capable to conduct the science for this. Unfortunately, they do not have the resources to operationalize it. So Wetlands International operationalized this by supporting the meetings and development of a business plan. And of course, we also have regular meetings on a monthly basis and quarterly basis. The monthly meetings are basically sharing of activities and planned activities. With this sharing, it leads to understanding of what the other is doing, what the other is intending to do, and the intentions of the other group. And so the next question is, communication needs to reach and engage with the community. And how did we do this? You scan the landscape and see what are the stakeholders, who are the stakeholders that have the strength and the network. We are very fortunate that in the landscape, there is this HIN11 Foundation Incorporated that has already a link with the indigenous peoples. As you can see here in this photo, this indigenous people across the mountain ranges of Kitanglad and Kalatungan, and these is in the watershed. And the HIN11 Foundation has already good history, track record of good working relationship with indigenous people, and it has good intentions, and we have shared values in terms of the restoration of the watershed and river basin. So what are the key factors or strategies for effective intersectoral communication? Basically, in a phrase, participation in field activities. Wetlands International, as well as Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, participated in the field activities led by the HIN11 Foundation. The HIN11 Foundation has to come up with or establish a community garden, a food security garden so that the people can rely on this even during crisis. And this was really a great help, especially during the COVID pandemic situation. And we also help in the shading and the replanting of Kalyana. We use shading to kill the kogon. This is the wild grass that grow after the trees are cut down. And then the replanting of native trees and fruit trees. And the third success factor is developing a livelihood with the community. In picture is a grain. This is called adlai. This is a very special grain that is equivalent to rice, but it is a health product because it has a high glycemic index and it's very good for diabetic people. And the sugar level of people eating this grain is good for their health. So this grain, adlai, is one of the livelihoods that's grown with the community, and the community sells it to the Cabanban Foundation, and the Cabanban Foundation sells it to the bigger market, health products, health shops in the urban areas. So what trade-offs had to be made, both indirect or indirect?
Annadel?
Yeah.
The session ends in a couple of minutes, so can you make sure you more or less wrap up?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so the flip side of inclusivity is exclusivity, and in particular, it's basically for ecological work. Wetlands International is more for ecological work. For instance, in this project, we are interested in the landscape functional analysis, but this is really assigned to Cabanban Foundation. So it doesn't have to be a negative thing. So what we did was again, as I've said, if this is collaboration, you share your resources, as a consortium, you share what your strengths are. So Wetlands International shared the strengths. And so in summary, yeah, it's good to have a project that's at the very start, it's already inclusive of the different stakeholders in the landscape. And you can scan for the landscape stakeholders and work with the local NGOs or groups and build on these local NGOs. Participate in field activities because it engenders camaraderie, bondness, and so on that Juliette was saying in Vietnam. And sharing openly and willingly of resources, and be willing to collaborate and have a consortium. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Annadel. Dennis and Juliette, knowing that we are at time, but I'm actually totally unsure how this works in the Amsterdam International Water Week schedule, but I'd like to hear your reflections on Annadel's story. It really very much resonates with the work you both have been doing, but would be good to get your take on it and see a connection. First Dennis, and then I'll end with Juliette.
Yeah, thank you, Henk. Thank you, Annadel, for the excellent presentation. I know the project, of course, because it's one of the projects which we are supporting. But I think it's such a wonderful example of an holistic approach, tap to source. It's about clean drinking water, but for clean drinking water, you need water from the source, and you're working on protecting water from the source. So it's all about the value in water principles. Another point which I find very interesting, it's inclusivity from the social perspective, also taking into consideration the knowledge of indigenous groups more upstream, but also inclusivity with regard to nature. And if we talk about social inclusivity, it's also always about the human, but I think the total concept of inclusivity, it's human and nature and biodiversity. And I think this project is doing that. And I think we need many of these type of examples and approaches in the world to get to where we want and where we need to be. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Very clear. Juliette.
Yes, thank you, Henk, and thank you, Annadel, indeed, for a really inspiring and interesting presentation. So my work is mostly in capacity building for institutions, so universities in Southeast Asia. And what really resonated with me, which is also very true in the work we're doing, is that you can involve people in field work. And I think especially in integrated water resources, this is such an important part. So we try to do the same through this concept of citizen science, right? So can you measure water quality maybe with your mobile phone? Can you measure the rainfall quantities with little buckets in your backyard? And this really is also important in the bigger message of the water issues that the whole world is facing. So I like that part of your presentation. And also this shared goals and objectives. I think this is so important in the starting phase of a project, that you're all going towards the same goals and objectives indeed. And I'm really impressed with the work you did, and I hope to see more of it in the future. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks
both Dennis and Juliette. I really think that what resonates across everything you've been presenting and saying is this way, and I think, Dennis, your community of practice and how you work with Stephanie from Deltaris on how to bring again people together to reflect on how it actually works, bringing people together in the context of these massively challenging environments and international engagement, how we can do much better. And Annadel, thanks so much for sharing the work from on the ground in the Philippines, so relevant and important, but also under such dire circumstances. And Juliette, thanks also for sharing from Vietnam your already impressive experience. Look forward to hear more from you in your road ahead. I unfortunately have -4 minutes in this session, so there really is no way we can expand this conversation further. But I hope for the audience, these were experiences shared that inspire you all to look again at how you actually work around the world, how collaboration works, what it really means for you as a water professional, as a climate resiliency community professional, and rethink how you start in engaging with others around the world in these very dire contexts. Ask a question first, hold your breath, reach out and embrace the most vulnerable first before coming in with ideas. And I know the challenges are massive, so we need your ideas and your expertise too, but only through inclusion, partnerships, and capacity that will actually make an impact. Thanks so much, Annadel, Dennis, and Juliette. Wish you a great Amsterdam International Water Week, a great COP26, of course, and hope to see you again and perhaps even visit you in the Philippines. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Henk. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Next question.